So, I, this is the kind of example I give of a guy crossing the street wearing Wrangler jeans. Right? Gets hit by a drunk driver driving a black Audi. Okay? The black Audi hits him, knocks him onto the hood at about 45 miles an hour, and he leaves a good dent on the car, an impression of his jeans later we find, and takes off. And they get a plate, we're able to follow it to a house, right? Guy's gone in, parked his car, put it in the garage, and is trying to hide it, and just won't come to the door and answer the door, right? Now, how do we get in there and the rights of all the people that a crime has been committed? The guy left the scene of a crash, but he's secure in his home. He's secure in his things without, and I can't just walk in there because I think, right? At this point, I know the crime's already over. The other people are taken care of, but I'm trying to gain property evidence. So I need to stop and explain to a judge in writing, here's all the facts that I know. Here's the things we are pretty sure we're going to find when we go into that house, and keep it very, very narrowly scoped. It has to say, I want to look for damage on this car, probably on the front end of this car at some location, and look for, it'll show impressions of jean material, could show blood, could show hair. These are the things I'm looking on, that probable cause that belong to the victim, and then I want to take samples of the blood, the hair, the jean fabric, whatever I find on the car, and then I want to impound the car, because I'm going to make sure the car, that later they'll say, oh, my brakes went out, or something ridiculous that you know darn well isn't going to be the cause, but you have to rule out the mechanical failures and that kind of stuff. So we're going to also want to impound that car if we find what we think we're going to find, right? But if I go inside and find that I'm walking in, and then I'm searching the trunk of that car and find 5 keys of coke, well, that's outside the scope of what I actually thought I had. And just because I happened to be in something, the trunk popped while we were sitting in the car, or somebody hit the button, it opens, and there's something there. Hey, is that a part of the scope of this warrant? You're like, nope, stop right where we're at. Now I need to stop and say, here's something new I discovered, Judge, while we were here. And the reason I want to stop is to show with integrity that I am following exactly what I believe our country was founded on, was saying, is it unreasonable? You know, I should never be worried about what I'm doing. And I love that we all have cameras, pretty much are all wearing body cameras now, which actually I thought, wow, I can't believe I need to wear a body camera for people to believe what I have to say. And if you look at it from the other side, is, why do you care? If what you're saying is the truth, why not let that be the best play-by-play you've ever seen? And it is taken away all the people when I would stop someone and say, hey, I stopped you for doing this or that. And they would say, you called me a name, or you were looking down my blouse, or you were doing something, because they knew they were getting a ticket, and now they're looking to try and get you in trouble. Yes, the video is the easiest way in the world to go, well, that didn't happen, and we have an independent witness, right? But it's also a very difficult tool to use. You go to a car, you go up, the guy reads you the riot act or whatever, you go back to your car and sit down, and you say something like, what a horse's patoot that guy was sitting in the car. Well, your video's still running, and you're in the car behind the windshield. He didn't hear it. You're just talking to yourself, but is that a violation of his rights? And you get lawyers all over the place who are looking for, oh, you're a prejudicial person on him because you called him a name when you sat back down in the car. And so it's a two-edged sword of, we're trying to do the right things, but we're still human beings. Like, wow, what a bunch of jerks, right? So when I start talking through that, I start thinking, yeah, my Fourth Amendment rights I get, right? When we start talking about trials and punishments and the Fifth Amendment, that you don't have to talk to me, right? Miranda is pretty much saying that I need to tell you your rights because you're too dumb to, that's the assumption, is that you're too dumb to know what you should do, and maybe you're freaking out, or you're not thinking clearly is probably how I should put that, right? The government is protecting people's rights because they can't be coerced into a statement that would put them in jeopardy. And I always think, man, I'm not sure I agree with the way you took that to being that I needed to tell you what your rights were and that you didn't have to talk to me, but that is the law of the land. That's what we have gotten through starting here. When we started talking through the Fifth Amendment, at some point it became the Miranda warning, and the Miranda warning became you have the right to remain silent. Oh, well, you should have known that as a citizen, that you didn't have to say anything because of the Fifth Amendment. But somewhere down the line, some judge was trying to side with, hey, let's find some middle ground so our police do not become the secret police, or historically looking at things. And I could see that of, I don't want to be coerced into something, or holding a gun over here off of while I'm asking you what you did, kind of a thing, right? Not being coerced into statements that you know are not true, right? So you have the right to remain silent. And then you would tell them that anything that they say can and will be used against them in a court of law. They have the right to an attorney. You cannot afford an attorney. One will be appointed to represent you before you make any statements or ask any questions. Do you understand all these rights, right? Knowing those rights, are you willing to still talk to me about this incident, these things tonight? You can pick and choose what questions you want to answer and which ones you don't. And that's kind of how I would put it for people. And a lot of times I would get I'm going to reserve my right to remain silent. Great. I've got everything on video. I really don't need your statement anyway. I've seen whatever it was. I've got the circumstantial evidence, or I've got the physical evidence, or I watched you do it and it's on my camera. A lot of the times it'll be like that, or I have witnesses who saw what you ended up doing. And most of the time I would understand people who took their right to remain silent, right? As a law enforcement officer, it becomes very hard when you start to see people tell you, you know the law, and then you try and do a search based on something. Case in point in Colorado is you stop a guy for driving drunk. And he's all over the road. He's stopped in, almost hitting cars. You light him up, pulls over to the side of the road, smell the alcohol on him. You can smell the congeners is what it is. Alcohol's odorless, but you can smell what you know is being beer or wine or mixed drinks, things like that we randomly, or that we associate with alcohol, right? So you get out, do nystagmus, some standardized sobriety standard field sobriety testing. Do it the same way every time for every person, so that I did it on my 4-year-old daughter so that I could say, hey, because everybody says nobody can pass these, so I purposely did it on my 4-year-old daughter to say, could you pass this, honey? And we did a whole set of roadsides just to see if she could. A 4-year-old can pass the roadsides, right? If you just sit there, explain it to them, because there's nothing that's a trick. It's literally, hey, stop and talk. And then, do you understand everything I just asked you to do? Okay, go ahead and do it. And then you'll find out that most of them don't have a memory long enough to remember the 3 or 4 steps within it, but you said it at the beginning. But at that point, you're like, no, you said you understood everything. Do as instructed and see where it goes. Then I go to the next one, and I ask them to do the next one, and they'll go through that. So you get them to where you're arrested to a point where you know beyond a reasonable doubt that they're impaired in the slightest degree, at least in Colorado, and you put them in cuffs and you got to take them to jail, right? You get into the car because you're going to tow the car. There's nobody else in the car. You're not going to leave it on the side of the road for people to steal all the stuff out of, because what we found over the years is people would claim that they lost $1 million that happened to be sitting in the car and stuff, right? I lost my $5,000 gold watch that was sitting in the car, and you cops took it, and that kind of stuff. So you towed a vehicle for safekeeping, where they had to sign a release on the side of the road that said, I'm going to leave my car here rather than have it towed for safekeeping. We gave them the option most of the time, unless they were a jerk. And if they were a jerk, you just towed it and sent it in. It was going to cost them the tow bill, right, to get it back out of impound. But it was secure, and we knew, and we went through and inventoried the car. So when you go and open containers, or you open the glove box and you find a couple of stolen weapons in the middle of the glove box, whoa. I've got stolen weapons. Hey, we're going to have some weapon charges. And the judges will tell you, oh, no, that is not part of what you were there for. You were there because you had a DUI and you were doing an inventory of the vehicle of what was there. When you found those guns, you kept going. You should have stopped right there and asked a judge, hey, I found another possibility that these weapons, so... I think you're good at the point that you see a weapon and make sure it's safe, and then run the serial number on the weapon to find out that whether or not it belongs to that person or what. It doesn't show up who it belongs to. It only shows the ones that are in the database as being stolen. So you just put in, I've got a Colt 45 Python, and that's this serial number, and it'll either pop hot or it'll pop clear. It's not it belongs to this guy. It's not a registration. It's not like a car. It just will pop up whether it's hot or not, right? At that point, now do we have to stop? So in most of my career from the 90s through about 2004, 2005, there was no problem with doing that at all. Inventory search, and you found drugs, guns, knives, weapons, paraphernalia, pornography, anything that became a part of a crime that you had every right to just go in because you were inventorying the vehicle, right? But like usual, there's probably some of those incidences where somebody was nefariously searching a car under the pretext of, you didn't have a proof of insurance card in your car today. I'm going to tow your car for no insurance because I know you're a drug dealer, and if I just tow your car and do a search incident to arrest, an inventory tow, I'm going to find something to put you in jail over. That's not what our government was looking for us to do to people either, right? You have to be a citizen who understands the difference between what's expected as a law enforcement officer, where you would want them to go, where you don't want them to go. The ends do not justify the means. And I think that ultimately is what it comes back down to, is every time you do something where the ends justify the means, it gets in front of a court of law saying, what is the scope of where you're able to search? What is the things we should and shouldn't be allowing? And then they'll literally give you there I was. And I stopped Farmer Brown on this day as he was leaving from the house where we're sure he was buying drugs and that kind of stuff, right? And I stopped him for a license plate light out on his car. Legitimate violation. And lo and behold, I got him out to pat him down, and I was feeling him down for weapons, but he had a baggie of drugs in his pocket. Pulled out the drugs and saw it. And the judge and the lawyers all go, you were patting him down for weapons. Did that feel like a weapon? You are going to lose that because you weren't being forthright in what you were actually doing. Now, if you came across and you said you were patting it down, but I did realize I had this, now you're going to have to explain yourself to a judge, right? Or you're going to have to explain it on camera, which is even better. Like, I was patting him down for weapons. I found no weapons, but I did ask, what is in your pocket that feels like it could be drugs or paraphernalia, and see what they end up telling me, right? Then you have to make a real quick decision based on, all right, do I have reasonable suspicion? Would you sitting here watching the video from the outside at your house be laughing and going, he's got drugs, he just came from a place, this is probably at least reasonable suspicion now, but was that his pretext in the first place? You were sitting outside of a drug house waiting, and you got out to pat him down for weapons? BS. You are waiting to pull him out for the drugs, and you know it, right? And that puts law enforcement in a harder place when they're trying to use the rules in a way to be advantageous in this one case. And then it creates a case law for you where a judge goes, no, we're not doing it like that anymore. You can't just do a inventory search on vehicles anymore in Colorado. You can't because of this kind of a thing, because it was used in a context or in a way that it probably shouldn't have been used. So even though the law's on the books, it becomes one of those, but the case law on that law makes it pretty impossible for us to use it anymore.
So, I probably have 100 questions just in what you just said, but so for the sake of flow.
Okay.
I was a prison guard for a while.
Okay.
And there are rules. If you ask for an ID, or if you ask their name, you ask a question, they have to answer it. And your safety, what protects you is, well, you can write them up if they don't give you that information. And so my worry, concern, it's very similar to, it sounds like it's very similar to what you're saying, because then they would say, but you have to write a report on it. I'm not against that. But the headache of the report, the headache of the paperwork, the headache of most people wouldn't do it. Most guards would not do it. I'm going to stay here for another 3 hours writing this report. And I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm saying there's a certain process and a certain way that, well, you're protected, because all you have to do is ask them and they should do it. And then all you have to do is this and all you have to do is that. And so I relate that to what you're saying, because there's an illusion that nothing's getting done with drugs, nothing's getting done with criminals, nothing's getting done with people who are breaking the law, and the only people who are being attacked are the innocent people who aren't doing anything wrong at all. So you said a lot in that one, and I guess I'd like to go back to what you first said is reasonable. And the definition of reasonable, when you are starting out as a police officer, you're starting out as law enforcement, and they say it has to be reasonable. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? A
preponderance of the evidence, right? So you consider all the scenarios of where you're at and what you're in. Is there more than a 50% likelihood that what you think is happening is happening? A guy is at 2 a.m. walking around in the neighborhood in a black hoodie with a black mask and in black clothing, walking through a neighborhood at 2 a.m. Is it reasonable to believe that at 2 a.m. walking around in clothes that darken their features to darken them in clothing so that they wouldn't be seen, that an officer should be making contact with that person to see if they believe they are committing a crime, right? That is the reasonable part of that, right? And all I would have to say is it 50% most likely that that could be happening? I could be absolutely wrong. And there are numerous times that it's some kid walking around at 2 a.m. Who knows what he's really doing, right? I've also been there numerous times where he's got pockets full of stuff and broken windows down the street from these things that make it very easy to go, hey, I have a reasonable suspicion that you are committing a crime and I'm protecting people, right? The problem in Colorado is the subjectivity of who's hearing the case and where do they come down on this, which is why I like body camera so much. Like, let's go to the video. Go ahead. Let's play it within the confines of how the contact actually happened, because you would be amazed at how many of these frivolous nonsense complaints of what people say happened never happened. And so that becomes that really easy standard of look around and what are you seeing as you are here to guard things. You are here to protect people, property, and to have people to be secure in the things that they have in the places they live.
And that, I need to interrupt on that, because that's also assuming that everyone is minding their own business. You know what I mean?
Right.
And really though, and how many there a lot of people are statistic people. If most of this is happening to this person, but a lot of that is if you draw attention to yourself, or if you're not minding your own business, or if you're walking around at 2 a.m. And I can't say that if I was stopped at 2 a.m. just walking, which well, there's a lot of different conversations we could have with that. But if I'm walking around at 2 a.m. and someone asks me what I'm doing as a dad, as a husband, as somebody that works, what am I doing around here at 2 a.m.? You know, and I don't, not that it's anybody else's if I'm arguing with my wife, or if I'm arguing with my brother and I need to take a walk. I don't know. There should be a million different reasons, but if I sat down and I was honest with myself, right, is it reasonable for this person to ask me what I'm doing at 2 a.m.? Right. And there's the argument goes back and forth of, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, you're fine. And I can see that to a point, and then I can see another side of it. And just to play devil's advocate, if there are, I'm sure you've seen the videos of somebody trying to pass through the border, or somebody stopped at because you brought it up about the checks, the sobriety checks, right. And there's multiple videos of here's how you can tell them to leave you alone because it's unlawful for the, and you're kind of, I understand it not being, if it's not reasonable, but what if it is reasonable? And that's why I ask, well, what's reasonable? And it's kind of like, well, if it's 50%, or if it's, and I'm assuming there's classes law enforcement will take where you talk about this very thing, where this is what reasonable means. This is how much of it you have to have.
Right.
And
case law on that. Right.
Really?
Yeah, where you're looking at it and going, they also give you scenarios and what would you do with this and why do you think you have it or why you don't. And then, walking around at 2 a.m. and happen to be going to work and they start work at the donut shop at 3 a.m. very well could be a reasonable. The first thing I always think is this person, instead of me assuming the worst, assume they're in trouble or assume there's a problem. Can I help you? Are you all right? Is always how I started those conversations, like legitimately from human being to other human being. Are you all right? Right? Within seconds, people will give away whether or not what they're doing is legitimate or whether or not what they're doing is nefarious. And you can tell within seconds that you're going to have a problem with somebody who's doing something they know they shouldn't be doing, and they're usually just more pissed that you caught them. And so they're going to be overly aggressive in trying to respond to get you to back down. And they forget that most of the guys doing what we do are alpha males anyway. Like, hey, I would love confrontation, bring it, kind of a thing. Don't mistake my kindness for weakness, sunshine. Let's talk, because these people pay me to protect them, and so do you, and I'm going to do that, and I don't know who you are, where you're doing, or I'm just asking what's going on and if you're okay to begin with. Right? And it'll lead to wherever it'll end up leading. There's a lot of times where I'm pretty sure something was going on, but I couldn't prove it other than, what are you doing? It's 2 a.m. And, they look at you and go, I'm going for a walk. Go F yourself. And you have to then make a decision. Have I seen anything that makes me think he's breaking into things or carrying tools? Is there anything down the street that's been broken? Is there any history over the last few months of we've had anything that meets what we're looking for? Do I have enough to say, no, I have enough to ask you for ID? Let's see some ID, because I have a reasonable suspicion that you may be committing or are about to commit a crime, right? So it's not just that you've already done it, but I might have caught you on your way to it. And so that's a very slippery slope of do you have enough? And with body camera, it's much easier to just be able to look at most of the scenarios and seeing it. And the problem is if you don't have the dash cam and the body camera, you're getting a picture of the steering wheel before you get out. And then you didn't see whatever the cop actually saw, and you're getting out and having to put two and two together about what the cop sees. And like I tell my guys, talk to your camera. Hey, I saw this guy walk in. He's on the side of the road down here. And just give a play-by-play of why you're thinking the things you are thinking, because you're literally writing your report right there on the body camera as you're going.
And it's also a lot of that also is assuming not just that that people are minding their own business or that they're doing absolutely nothing wrong. It's also that the law enforcement officer is totally sincere about trying to, and so again, going back to being a guard, it's easy because these people are already, they're in prison for a reason. So they were, whether or not you think they were guilty in a court of law in some way, they're in prison or they're in jail. And going through my training when I was going through the academy for being a correctional officer, there were some that it was pretty clear their intention to just be a badass or push people around because they could, because they're not guilty. I'm a guard. I'm not guilty. You're guilty. So I can, and there's there were some guys that I spoke with in there. They'd been there for 15, 20 years. They didn't like any of them because no one's guilty in there. And then you hear some stuff of, there are some that do. They do know that they're guilty, and you can go back and forth. It doesn't matter. But the fact is, what I'm trying to say is that there were some guards that, hey man, it's peaceful right now. Why are you trying to do this? And so even me on that end, I'm like, I know that most of these guys are lying. I know that most of them don't like you. I know that most of them are guilty. I did not judge them. So can I say 100%? No, I can't. But I'm in here to do this, and you're a guard. Be a guard. And so I relate that to this in law enforcement. You have so many more judgments to make. You have so little time to do it in terms of protecting somebody. Because I'm just sitting in a prison guarding these people. But even I am like, hey, man, stop. What are you doing? You're making this guy mad. Like, stop.
Right.
Quit this. And so is there that?
In fact, I think that is why I think you hit the key of what is going on in law enforcement. Let's talk about what we see in San Francisco right now. And that people are literally leaving their cars unlocked and their back hatches open so that the people who are coming by to break and steal things and get into cars won't break their windows and see that it's empty. They would rather leave their property unlocked because otherwise they come smash the window to the back little window, pull the seat down to see what you left in the trunk. And so the people have realized the cops are not coming to help us. I still have to function. I still have to live, but this is not a high enough priority in San Francisco anymore that it is assumed that you are going to have a property crime happen against you. And so many people have resorted to not locking their vehicles and opening their trunks or opening the lids to show, hey, right? I think all the time, you're also opening that up to make it a really easy car theft and those things. Why? Because they have hamstrung their officers to the point, like we are starting to see here in Colorado, of this House Bill 2217, right? We have a really bad cop who does some really bad crap in Minnesota.
Can you layman that?
Sure. So what that means is after all of the things happened in Minnesota, everybody had a knee-jerk reaction that their prejudice was that all cops are underhanded, trying to kill people, trying to hurt people, and need to be reined in. So in Colorado, it became the Law Enforcement Accountability Act. So that, hey, we're going to make you all wear body cameras. Great idea. We needed the funding for things like that. That's epic. I wanted a system to be able to have recordings. So if you're paying for it, I'm happy for you. I'll be happy to turn on a camera for you. The problem is they were so sure that guys were on the take or doing the wrong things that they even wrote in. And if you try and play with your camera or stop your camera or don't have your camera rolling on these things, it's assumed whatever you would have missed can't find them guilty. So if it's not on camera, it didn't happen. You're like, okay, so a lot of agencies went to automatic camera starts when the lights come on or when you open the door and that kind of stuff to try and take the people of double clicking their camera, literally clicking it. What if you clicked it 3 times? What if you held it too long? Or what if it literally malfunctioned? So you have to start your camera at the beginning of the day and do a system check on it. And a small video that shows it was working at the beginning and working at the end to protect yourself from these things. Now, you have to record all your stops. And everybody is also passing in that same bill was, and if you violate someone's rights, knowingly violate somebody's rights, you could be personally, civilly liable. In the past, law enforcement, you are acting on behalf of the authority vested in you by whichever agency it was. But now this caveat from the state is, well, you might be personally liable while you're at work for what you're doing under the color of your authority personally, and we could take up to $25,000 off of you if we find that later you had violated these people's rights. And I keep going back to, under whose discretion are we deciding whether or not I was doing that? I tell the cops all the time, you don't have anything to worry about if you're not doing anything wrong. The video is going to vindicate you 95% of the time. What you can't see is like what happens when you're running, or the video is clouded, or the mic is muddy, or the camera lens is muddy and it doesn't get recorded. What does that look like for a cop? So if you're a cop and you're sitting there thinking these things through, and you're in a state that literally passes something that says, we're passing this because we don't trust you as cops, and you're thinking, I'm going to stop these registration violations. Should I stop somebody for a registration violation? Should I stop somebody for weaving a little bit in their lane? Is it really going to be worth the liability I'm putting on my family? Because it is way easier to sit and do nothing and collect a paycheck for 10 hours, and it looks like we don't have a crime problem, or I didn't write anybody a ticket. Nobody, it was all quiet on the Western Front, right up until you see the property crimes go through the roof, because nobody's holding anybody accountable anymore, because everybody's now apathetic. Like, if that's what you want, then the law enforcement is going to start getting this idea of, then good luck. Will call me after the crime happens and we'll come take a report. And that is what whether that's what they were looking for, self-preservation of guys who are in their early 20s just starting to do this and don't have that kind of years of experience, that's going to be a default position of, is it worth it? And I would tell you, drive around Colorado Springs and look for just the temporary license plates that are more than 6 months out of date. That would have never happened 10 years ago. We just stopped the car, impounded the car, and put it in an impound lot. Now people have rights to their cars because maybe mommy will need to use it later, and you can't just take it off the road. And I go back to, then pay for the plates, and you'd be, no. You can't tow their vehicle because they have a right to their vehicle. It's their right to work. And you get that right by paying for those plates. That's not your call anymore. Case law has now said, nope, you can't just tow somebody's because it's unreasonable. And then as a cop, you're like, why am I putting myself in this position? I'm taking on the liability of these people who are going to hate me. I can't tow the car from them anyway. I'm going to write them a ticket and then watch it keep going down the road, because the case law has superseded now what the law actually told us we should be doing and what the regular public thinks we're enforcing. But in application, this is what happens when you don't let people enforce the laws the way that they were written in the first place, because you've got some judge who's assuming that you're all George Floyd complicit and doing business that way as a preponderance to your ability to make good wisdom and discernment decisions.
Is that so? Pulling somebody over for a registration violation, is that consistent with I stopped a crime? Does that make sense?
So I can tell you we did use license plate lights, expired plates, things like that, a broken taillight when I was looking for DUI arrests at night, right? Because there was a likelihood after 7, 8 o'clock at night and you're driving around that, hey, it's a violation that I can stop you for. Is it a crime? No, it's a traffic infraction. And the difference being you cannot go to jail for a broken tail light. I can stop you. I could write you all the tickets in the world at $17 and surcharge if I wanted to be a jerk and say, get your taillight fixed. And the next night, see you again and do the same thing if you hadn't fixed the taillight, right? It comes down to that wisdom and discernment of the people that you're guarding. But it's not necessarily a crime. So that's where a lot of people are saying, well, you shouldn't even be allowed to enforce traffic law because traffic law is being used to target and whatever you want to say, whatever the prejudice is of the officer, they're using it as an excuse to stop people and write them tickets and find other things that they're making up. Is that a possibility? Yeah. Is that a probability? I think that depends on where you're at. But let's take what happens if you don't let people stop or you don't make traffic. We've got problems in St. Louis right now where nobody stops for lights anymore because they're not enforcing traffic laws. Everybody goes as fast as they want, comes up to the light, make sure they didn't crash into somebody, goes right through, and they're just driving like there are no laws because they know that the council has decided we're not going to enforce this stuff. And the cops are kind of stuck in the middle of, why am I going to subject myself to this as an officer, maybe get in trouble, maybe get in discipline for a traffic infraction that they kind of frown on us stopping people for anyway. So where is that line?
Well, and that's what I mean. Like what is endangering with a registration violation as opposed to running a red light or driving drunk? And so I'm going to incriminate myself here, John. My plates are expired, you know. But I mean, I just say that because maybe a different podcast or conversation, but I think some of the fees or registration or traffic stuff is only meant to get money,
generate revenue for the roadways of the state of Colorado.
Is it preventing crime or is it providing public safety? And again, it doesn't mean that I get to disobey the rules or the laws, right? But,
sure.
But the question comes up.
So what I give you back on that is the reason we've asked for 2 plates in Colorado is to be running plates to find people running from crimes, right? Is to be able, I can read a plate coming at me pretty darn good after quite a few years of being a cop that was on the road and seeing plates. I can know if I'm looking for a plate and I can find at least 3 of the digits on that plate looking for a white Honda Accord with Charles John Lincoln in the plate. I am literally looking at every car looking for the white Accord and then looking for those 3 letters anywhere on the plate, and I can find it if the vehicle has 2 plates. It is much harder if they only have rear plates, which is why Colorado has always had that 2-plate law, right? The other thing is that's to help us know who's using vehicles in commission of a crime. You show that you're not doing anything wrong. You're putting numbers on so that they can research and find your car if somebody does take it from you, or if it is used in commission of something, we know where to come back and find it too. So is the registration, the costs and the taxes themselves? I think you're right. That is an absolutely separate conversation of where is the government's line, because we'd be very much on the same page on that. It's what am I willing to enforce and put myself at risk? Because every time I get out of that car and I walk up in traffic, I take the opportunity, or I take the responsibility that I might end up dead. And it's not necessarily the person in the car I'm worried about. It's usually the other people in traffic not paying attention, coming by and sideswiping or knocking you over a guardrail or killing you dead right there. And that's from seeing it happen and being on scenes and putting officers in body bags and knowing it happens, or being struck while covering crashes. And all of those have happened to me. And so I have real life experience to understand this is an extremely dangerous thing that I'm willing to do. So at some point, if the public doesn't want you really enforcing this one, which laws do you want me enforcing that are on the books, and which ones do you not? I don't know. That's up to me on a daily basis of discretion of what I've come across, right? But it's not like a poll. There's no survey monkey waiting. I found this crime. Everybody give me a Twitter feed of Elon Musk telling me what should I buy it? Should I not? Should I write this guy a ticket? Should I not? I have to make those decisions based on what I believe is the problem. Now, I would write people tickets based on if their driving behavior was dangerous and endangering others, if their speed was so egregious that I knew it caused accident causal factors of when we cover crashes, what factors do we say? And a lot of times it's that they were going too fast for their own ability to comprehend the problem coming and to make a reaction, because they cut down their reaction time so much because of the speed that they were going. They couldn't avoid what was going on, right? So are speeding tickets just for generating revenue? I would tell you they could be, if they're done in a place where it's a 25 mile an hour zone and you're looking to build somebody's coffers. But in the state of Colorado, most of that money, at least at the state level, goes into the general fund. You never see a penny of it back into the cops themselves. It goes to government somewhere, but it doesn't go right into our pocket. And that's not always true everywhere. There are small communities where they're generating revenue that ends up being on the books for those places. And I think everybody knows that and realizes that. And so as an officer, I sit there and think, I don't want to be a part of that. I would never write somebody a citation for the idea of generating revenue because you were doing something wrong, unless it was something that was legitimately a concern of something I had seen or a problem we were trying to deal with somewhere. And that's just traffic violations.
Right. And I don't want to make it sound like that we're only going to talk about, stuff that sounds dumb. But most of the cops I've talked to, they're like, I don't have time to write a traffic violation. So it's not about attacking that, but it is about, hey, what do you want? Because there is a cop I've talked to where they caught this guy in a stolen vehicle with a weapon as a felon, which is a felony, with cocaine, too much weed, and drug paraphernalia through the car trunk, literally. And gotta let him go, because and this is, I gotta be fair with this part though, this was in the midst of COVID. They're trying to limit the capacity of the jail cells and all this, so they have no room for him, but they gotta let him go. I segue that into here. It's just, well, what do you want? What do you want enforced? And the combination of stop breaking the law, and then, hey man, you're escalating something that doesn't have to be escalated. Why are you doing this? And I put that in a combination of just, it comes down to people being people, and it's from the law enforcement side, just like in the military side, it's, hey, you represent us and you're doing this. This is embarrassing. Stop it. I would relate that to the law enforcement side. It's like, hey, you messed this up for all of us, kind of a thing, and stop doing that. If you're minding your own, law enforcement not really minding their own business as much as enforcing the law. If you have that combination of somebody minding their own business and law enforcement just enforcing law, it probably makes for a pretty good city, probably makes for pretty good peace or order.
Being visible matters. And what you talked about in COVID, where we literally were writing people felony summonses. We had to create a process. A felony, people go to jail. I mean, it's just put cuffs on them, pat them down, take them to jail. With COVID and the scare of COVID and whatever, I'm very opinionated about this, but when I think about work, I have to be objective and fair, right? It was what was going on. They tied our hands that we could not take people to jail, yet we wanted to hold people accountable for their actions even if it was later, right? So we'd write them a summons, a felony summons for the crimes they committed and tell them, please come back, we'll see you. And hopefully they'd come back. And if they didn't, there'll be a warrant for their arrest. And the next time they got caught, the reports would be waiting for them. But it created such a huge backlog. And then we weren't trying any of these cases. We weren't doing anything with these cases for months and months and months. And when they came out of it, there was such a backup that you had to go, oh, okay, well, what we cannot plea, we will dismiss, seemed to be a lot of the lingo going around, because people were getting away with doing stuff that they just would never have been given a break on had they not been overwhelmed. And we're all blaming it on a sickness, right? And I roll my eyes and think, personally, what a bunch of nonsense. And then from a law enforcement point of view, thinking the circumstances of what was going on shouldn't change, that people need to be held accountable for their actions and especially their crimes. And I am certainly in the minority on that in a lot of places, in a lot of ways. And it makes you have to choose. Law enforcement is very unpopular right now, right? It is, but it used to be one of the coolest things you could do. It was looked at with distinction, right? I can't think of anything that outside of the military and my kids' service in the military and mine in law enforcement for a very long time. I think these are noble jobs. You're saving people's lives. People won't know how many lives we actually were able to affect or change. How many times I've done CPR or had people's blood in my mouth that wasn't mine, doing things I had to go and do to try and save people that I knew were probably a lost cause, and yet they're human beings, and I cared enough that it puts me in those positions. But like you said, you get jaded over the years, and you start to see the same problems and the people trying the same excuses, and so you know what you'd know, you just can't prove it. So you open a container you didn't really have the right to open in the car, and you found exactly what you knew was in there, and the ends justify the means because you're all scumbags. And that's where you have to really start retrospecting or introspecting on who am I and what do I serve and why am I still doing this? I cannot be jaded because people they can push me with a broad brush and say all cops are the same and they're all George Floyd killers, just like I could say everybody's a scumbag.
Mm-hmm. And what over the years, you started in the 90s?
I did.
What over the decades then has been, because Craig was out here and I, just this, the same as him being a judge, what changed over the years, and he made the comment that there were too many laws and too many rules, and then expanding on the laws, expanding on the rules, and making it really almost making it difficult to how do you actually interpret law when there's so many different statutes to this, and I asked the same question in terms of over the years, so So just to cut to, I blame people, whether you're law enforcement or a citizen, but I blame citizens more for not knowing certain things and not knowing their constitution, not knowing their laws, and almost in a sense, if you're doing this and you're following this, you're probably going to be okay. You're probably not going to be, if there's so much else going on with, in this case, since we're talking about law enforcement, if there's so much going on with law enforcement, if they're so busy with certain things, you're probably not important to them. But that is also assuming that people are minding their own business, not escalating it just as much as law enforcement is not escalating something unnecessarily. But I mean, if I get pulled over at 2 a.m. or if I get asked where I'm going at 2 a.m. and it has happened. Actually, I was working a job and I did pull over at 2 a.m., worked nights, sleeping in the car. Cop pulls up next to me and, hey, what are you doing? I mean, probably pretty reasonable, right? Are you dead or not?
Right? Are you, are you dead? Are you high? Are you about to die from the overdose you just had?
So I answer the questions and then, ask me if I had something to drink, and it kind of, and so I think back on that where, hey, well, how much have you had to drink? I haven't had anything to drink. Well, can you step out of the car for me? Well, hey man, I'll take a test. For what though? Because I'm not, and then I'm scared because I don't want to, this is sincere. I was scared of not trying to fight him because I'm like, are you going to put handcuffs on me? Or what are you going to do now? And so let me take the test, please let me, or whatever. And then, and it escalate, and it didn't escalate anything bad. It was just, all right, have a good night. And even then with me, being frustrated that he doesn't believe me that I'm not drunk, or doesn't believe me that I'm not, even in that midst, things worked out, things were fine. So I can only imagine how much of it has to escalate before it gets super bad from either side, law enforcement or somebody you
I think it's both ways, but at the world who's watching everybody, just roll your windows down a quarter inch, hand them your license, and don't talk to them. Give me whatever, I'm not talking to you about it. Versus in the 90s, there was a philosophy that said, ask, tell, make. And I'll tell you, we were quick to go through those 3 steps. There would not have been the 5-10 minutes standing at a window explaining ourselves like there is today on video. It would have been driver's license. No. I had to start it with, may I have your driver's license, please? No. I need your driver's license. No. And the third one would be opening a car door and sucking someone out of a car. That was the early 90s. That was, you still had the authority, that there was an expectation that you would be, not only that you were doing the right things, but that the people above, the district attorneys and then the judges that would eventually hear this, were going to support the men and women wearing that badge, saying this is what happened and this is why they didn't, and they should have, but they didn't. And that's why they ended up getting their hands put on and pulled out of a car. And now it's police brutality on the things where we would have pulled people out of a car back in the 90s, you would never do now, where you're sitting there having to think through. Time's on my side. I tell cops this all the time. Time is on my side. And you look like the superstar just sitting there letting people rant and still insisting that they're going to give you what you need to get. And there is no rush to have to get there, except that it's going to take them much, much longer part of their day. Right? So I think society has changed a whole lot, more of less knowing what their rights are and more assumption of, if I make a big enough scene about it, somehow I'm going to get away with it because these cops knew they were doing something wrong to begin with. And most of the time that is just not true. Like, I didn't stop you if I didn't have a reason to have a conversation. I'm not here at your house because I wanted to come here. There's something that somebody has reported that we are investigating, and I have every right to be here.
So in some of the, And I've watched these videos too, where they say don't talk to the cops, and you watch it for several reasons, but one is just why, in what situations should you not do that, and most of them, when you're guilty, don't talk to the and you're like, yeah, no kidding, right. And what situations, when, you know what, John, I lost my question, I lost my train of thought, but when they say, I know where I was going with it. When you're at the door, for example, and you're wanting to come in, or you're wanting to search something without the warrant part, because I've seen some of those before, not you, but I've seen that before too, where it's, well, he escalated the situation because he wouldn't let me in, and all I wanted to do was, look, if you're innocent, you're innocent. So I can understand it from that point, when it's like, hey man, no, if you don't have this, I'm not letting you in. So at what point do you, and that again, I go back to the bad apple, right, that ruins everything for everybody, or when you're in, and this is where I was mainly going with this, when you get brought in for questioning, and we just want to know this, because then in those videos, they will say they're just looking for somebody to book. They're just looking for someone to throw in trial so that they can say they got the guy. And then you hear those stories of people that admitted something that they actually didn't do. And I don't know how rare they are. They're probably, I don't know how rare it is for somebody to, because they've also, on the military side, they've shown that torture doesn't work. They'll just say anything to get out of that situation. And almost in the same way, if somebody's sitting in that interrogation room, they'll almost say anything to get out of there because they're scared. And then it's really bad, right? Because then they just said they did something that they didn't do. I don't know how often that happens. I don't know how often, but it's a thing. Sure. That does. Has that been something that you've ran into? Has that been something where you're like, maybe I shouldn't have pushed because, hey, we are scaring this person. I am scaring this person. And it's not, is it unreasonable to think, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have been, not you personally, but maybe my colleagues or my fellow law enforcement officers, maybe you shouldn't have done that because you did escalate this in a way you shouldn't have.
Sure. The first thing I would say is you were talking about exigency and circumstances of the need for an immediate action of like going into a house, right? The reasons you would go into the house, there's a lady was screaming, husband had her on the front yard, there was blood everywhere, and I see a trail of blood going in the front door. I'm not waiting for a warrant. I have a reasonable belief that somebody's life is in danger from the call, what I see on scene, and I have a reason to go into that house and break their Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable because it is reasonable. Any court's going to back me that look at what I'm seeing. In fact, it's these non-action that gets us in trouble, right? Guys standing outside of a school watching babies get murdered because they're standing around wondering whether or not their law enforcement leaders are going to grill them later about why they went in and didn't follow tactics. That's a loss of leadership.
And you're talking, I mean, just for the sake of being specific, you're talking about the school shooting in Texas.
In Texas, yeah. And you can see where you let people's intimidation of whether you're going to lose your job override your sense of right and wrong. The same thing comes down when you're bringing somebody in and you're having questions, right? Of how much do I really know is where I always go. What can I prove? Do I really have enough that I am just trying to catch this person in a lie and I already know I got the right person? Or am I legitimately trying to cancel them out as a suspect because I don't think it was them, but I need to go through this? Are you willing to talk to me? And everything comes down to asking versus making, right? It's one of those, am I free to talk to you? Am I required to come with you? And unless you're under arrest, you're never required to go with me. You must take physical custody of me. I must be under arrest, right? And the cops will tell you, oh, no. It's up to you whether or not it's in your best interest, however, and we'll go lighter on you if you come with us. You want to talk to us, right? In that same situation, I'm completely on board with you. Like, thanks, no. If you're not arresting me, I don't have anything to talk to you about. And that's usually what we had with people who were guilty, is they shut up and they didn't talk and they didn't violate their own right to remain silent, and there wasn't anything I could do about it, but they also were not a part of the witness against themselves. And so I've seen it both ways, and I've seen it where we had somebody in the room and they were wrong. They were the wrong suspect. They absolutely could clear themselves, and we had the wrong person in the room at the time, and they wanted to be in the room to get themselves out of the hot water of explaining you were wrong, and they're usually really pissed, and they should be. I understand when you tell somebody that you're accusing them of doing something they know darn well they haven't done, and in no way, you cannot unring the bell. If I tell you you are caught with child pornography and I'm wrong about it, how do I say it wasn't you later? The accusation is out there, and that's why everybody is assumed innocent until proven guilty. But I'm always cognizant of, am I sure that I have enough that reasonable suspicion or probable cause is even more than that. A preponderance of the evidence is even less than both of those. A preponderance of the evidence. Weighing between two, what is more likely to happen? Now, is that concrete evidence? That's going to get you a conviction? Absolutely not, right? Not beyond a reasonable doubt. But is it reason to investigate something going on? Yeah, you're going to get a little more leeway hoping that it does lead to a reasonable suspicion, or even better, to probable cause. But a preponderance of the evidence is, who should I be talking to about this crime when Sally told me Jimmy hit her, and Jimmy's the guy I want to go talk to because somebody told me that they hit him, right? That's more than I wonder who the suspect was versus the two kids on the playground. One's a white hoodie, one's a black hoodie. One of them hit him, and I'm not sure who it was. Okay, different preponderance of the evidence. I'm going to talk with both these boys, look for marks on their hands and look and see what's going on. That's really where we start to come down to, as an officer, of course, you're looking to find out what really happened. But if you're guilty of a crime, you're certainly going to try and throw law enforcement off of getting in trouble because nobody wants to go to jail and be responsible for the things they ended up doing if they can't live with it themselves. So almost everyone lies to you. And so after a number of years, you get jaded that you will talk to people anywhere and assume they're always lying to you on everything that they're telling you about. How's your family? They're fine. That's probably a lie. He's probably beating them at home. And then I have to remember, whoa, you are dealing with bad guys so much that you assume everyone else is like that. The best thing that ever happened for me is I coached high school soccer because there were young kids who I legitimately got to know as human beings and realized when they weren't, that they were all enjoying something else, and that they were people that I got to know and realized they were there in our collective interest of playing a game and we wanted to be great at. And you're like, I get that. That helped very much as I enjoyed that for doing that with them. They helped me more than they probably realize of, hey, everybody's not a scumbag. Everybody's not going to lie to you. I'm not going in to see another kid beat. I'm not going in to do CPR on another 3-year-old. I'm not here to listen to the wife explain why it's okay that her husband beats the crud out of her all the time, and the things you get in your head of, that guy needs a beat down. And there is no doubt those thoughts cross your mind like, what really needs to happen is we just need to take him outside and beat him so bad that he'd never do this again because he knows the next time we come back. Is that a thought cops have? It is absolutely. It's the thought any human being would have seeing some of the things. The difference is, can I control that? Because everybody who pinned that that badge represents that I'm a shield for them. I'm a shield for this, and that they expect that I'm not going to be vindictive, that I'm not going out with a vendetta against people to dispense my own justice, that this Constitution give us 3 different systems to be able to get there, so that no one person could be that judge, jury, and executioner at the same time. And I absolutely embrace that role of, I catch them and y'all clean them. Read my reports, and if you think it needs to be cleaned, it's cleaned. But what we're doing is hamstringing our own officers at this point of questioning the methods and assuming the worst in what they are doing, and whether or not that's what we're doing when they're following what's written on the books as laws. And so if you want to change the laws, and that's what our legislature spends so much time doing, is changing and revising laws that they don't like the way that they've shuffled out and justifying it through one thing or another of somebody's nefariously bad acts. It couldn't be that A plus B equaled C. Don't speed on our roads. We built the roads. Don't speed. Go the speed limits. We want people to not die. Couldn't be the problem. It's that you were trying to stop me to get in my car because I'm a polka dot person. Well, is there that opportunity? There's always been that opportunity, right? In any culture, in any time of anybody who had authority over anyone else. Where's your integrity, and what are you willing to show on video so that everybody can see it later? So when we all agreed, yeah, put it on video. I'm down. You go ahead and put it on video, and then we'll watch it later. I think that should have gone a long way for the public to be able to know, hey, we could watch any one of these at any time, and we'll watch any of the ones that are contentious at some point. But not understanding the context of everything that happens before the videos sometimes is a huge piece of, we've been chasing this person for 30 minutes. They've done this, and this. And then you're seeing a 10-second snippet at the end out of context that makes you lead you to believe something different.
And you just touched on several things, but some of the details are important, and some people, and even in some cases, I just want the facts. That's all I want. And those facts would also include, like you said, that I did 30 minutes of this chase, and some of those details are important when you see just a 10-second video. And I think that these details of knowing the process, which is why I blame some citizens for not knowing the process, me included, not knowing how certain things work. Am I escalating this? Am I making this worse? Or is he making this worse? And almost even in any case, and Chris Rock had some of the best reactions to some of this because it's, hey, did he tell you to do this? Then you do it. And it's the distrust that has been blown up in media, blown up. The free speech of the freedom of the press and the free speech of the press has blown this up out of proportion, where now there's distrust. So now I could see where there's more pushback when you want to search the house because you see a blood trail and you heard someone screaming, or it's 2 a.m. I'm going to pull you over and talk to you. The distrust comes from, well, you're just targeting me, but it's been from, well, you should distrust them. You shouldn't trust the cops because of the targeting of specific people, the George Floyds, or whatever the case is. And it's important to know these details because I feel like if over the decades, if things have changed, and it's important to at least ask why. Why has domestic violence gone up since you've been a cop from the 90s to now?
I think it's about the same.
Okay.
I do. I think
really
it's reported more now because it is expected that people are more guardians about, I'm protecting women, in public, and there's a big cry for what we see on the videos. I think a lot of that comes down to This only snippets you're ever going to see of cops are ones that are exciting, somebody's hurting, or somebody's done something wrong. The hours of boredom driving around and stopping and talking to people at the gas station or stopping the person who was going 10 over, they're never watched because that's not exciting. It's only the ones that are, this is what you see. And if all you put in front of people is the bad videos, the ones who made mistakes, do cops make mistakes? They make mistakes all the time. Are they not as well trained as they should be? Do they say things out loud? Do their prejudices sometimes come out and get in front of them? And they're human beings with their own problems? Absolutely. And that's the videos that you see, to the point that if that's all you put into your head and you never go anywhere else, you're going to believe that that is the society and the place where you live, and that all the cops are like that. If you allow that without any wisdom and discernment of your own to go, do I know a cop? Do I know any of these human beings? Is that how I see them act and respond in daily life? Do I have an expectation that's what they go do? They're real nice in daytime when I see them, and then at night they go beat the crap out of people, and then they go back to seeing us in the supermarket the day after. I don't think anybody who's using their brain really thinks that's happening, just like this cop who uses his brain does not think the majority of people are going out and committing crimes on a daily basis.
A lot of stuff there is this illusion that it's worse than it used to be. And it might not be an illusion, right? I still, even just in my lifetime, when people talk about things, I ask about the domestic stuff because there is that illusion that it's so much worse than it used to be. But when you say you don't think it's changed very much, or it's just reported
when you say
more.
Domestic, I hear domestic violence. If you're talking about any kinds of crimes, I think there is a proclivity for more and more crime. I think there are more crimes being committed and a lot more petty offensive. A lot of the lots of the shoplifting, I think that's going through the roof. And I think the reason those crimes are going through the roof is because it has now become acceptable when you can't afford something to go in and just take it. Who's going to stop you? How many YouTube videos where people just go in and film themselves taking crud off the shelves and walking out and being like, stop us. Right. And they're taking it as a badge of courage. 20 years ago, that wouldn't happen. That would not be allowed to happen. So you also have to realize we've put a generation of police officers who've grown up watching these videos, and we're slowly changing that society standard of, well, they were hungry and food is a human right. And you just sit there and go, but if you keep getting this indoctrinated in your head over and over and over, well, it only costs big business. It's not an actual person. It's just a company. What do you care if they come in and take the pizza off the shelf and don't pay for it? Because it's not hurting anyone.
Right. When you said it too, where's the line at some point?
Right.
Where's the line of, and when I mean domestic, I mean more of, and I apologize, I mean more of what's at home. Men, husbands beating their wives or their kids, and what I read and what I research is probably nothing compared to what you've had to see or investigate or whatever. But I read things, one in particular, a father beating his child, his 5-year-old, because he took like the last piece of birthday cake or something like that. And that's just one story it's not one that I've read, but I'm just saying, I'm giving one example of probably a lot, right? But have things like that escalated since the 90s? Or like you said, is it just being reported more, or is it not?
So every time we go into the hospital now with my children who like to break their arms snowboarding and doing silly things, they ask them a set of questions now. Do you feel safe at home? Okay. And are you feeling like you're going to hurt yourself? 2 questions that the last few times they've asked have really set me off, right? No wonder we have a whole lot more reporting of things. You have teachers, you have medical workers all asking these questions now about whether or not people feel safe at home. So that wasn't being asked in the 1990s or the 2000s. That was people's personal business. Unless there was evidence of things, we weren't coming out, and no one would have tolerated a bunch of people from the outside asking those questions without a probable cause, a reasonable suspicion, or even a preponderance of the evidence. Now, a broken arm on a kid coming into the ER, hey, you should ask how that happened, right? And then see how they react to it and watch how people are doing it. And if you're a hospital worker, I get that, right? If you're in there and you're sick and you came in because you got the flu, why are you asking that as a question? Do I not have, what makes you, that's an accusatory statement, and it's all based on, oh, no, we're protecting people. Like, we're protecting people by asking questions that are none of your business, and you're not a legal or you're not a person that should be asking those questions. Well, the government tells us now we need to ask those questions. You're like, oh my goodness, where's this line of where I have to answer the questions or make any statements? And where's my Fifth Amendment rights of not making any incriminatory statements? And how can you ask my children these things when they're not 18 years old? Ask me. They're not 18. Well, it's for their own good. So you have made it a judgment that you are more responsible for my children than their guardian. I have a hard time on that slippery slope when you start talking through, I understand the reasoning for it. If you aren't doing anything wrong, what do you care about the question? And that's usually how I take it. It's how it happened. I hope it does stop people from if it's stopping kids, but at what level is it intrusive, or are you looking for something on somebody is always in the back of my head. But your question was, are crimes going up? I think reports of crimes are up a lot. Whether or not this was happening at about the same rate in the 80s and 90s as it is now, I don't know, right? Because you didn't have people reporting on the things, and they didn't have the ease of the Safe to Tell and the different resources to be able to pick up their personal phone to say, my dad spanked me, call the cops. And have the cops show up because dad spanked them and spanked them soundly. That would not have happened in the 80s and 90s either. They didn't have the resources to do it, but nobody in their right mind would have gone into a house and said, oh, we need to see whether or not you were abusing your children by giving them a spanking versus giving them a beating, right? Two completely different stories.
And when I was a teacher and I saw a kid with bruises in particular places where it's like, I think of the whole probable cause thing, and I'm not a cop. I'm not like, so I'm not going to arrest this person or anything, but sending them back home with, I mean, like black eyes and hey, how'd you do that, Jimmy? And nervous, not answering you. And so you get uncomfortable. Right. And so it's just, as well as the kid being uncomfortable. And you do, and nothing, and it's not about something something does need to happen. But where I'm ultimately going with all of this is hopefully that there's an understanding of what the executive, those who are executing the laws, are supposed to do, as well as what you're supposed to do as a citizen, as well as, hey, if we let it go too much, and you don't trust, you're so pent up, you don't trust anybody. Law enforcement doesn't trust anybody either, because they're making calls to a crime scene. The cop will show up and they shoot the cop, and so there's just as much distrust on the other side as there is. So with all the distrust, and ultimately where I'm going with this is what's happening, what's going on, and it's people. It doesn't matter what happens, people are a part of it. And why is it happening? I don't think it's a very deep, probably confusing, complicated answer, but that's why I bring in judges, or I'll bring in law enforcement and hopefully get some congressmen in here to what makes a city run peacefully, and why is there, if there is, why is there domestic violence going up? If there's not, how come it's not? What's going on in that area where citizens are minding their own business, or not so distrustful of law enforcement, or law enforcement is not so distrustful of citizens? I would argue that they're more distrustful of citizens in LA and San Francisco and Chicago, as opposed to a smaller community or town that maybe not much is happening there. You're telling kids to not sit in the back of trucks down the highway, or a dirt road or whatever, which, some of that sounds petty, but I don't think it's an illogical question to ask, at least, why is it happening over here as opposed to over here? Because you're in Monument now, right? And smaller town, smaller community. What is
the difference in my mind is honor and mutual respect. So if it really came down to those couple of words, I would say, first of all, that I'm going to honor my mother and father. I should have been doing that to begin with, to being able to do the right things. Now, I think maybe everybody didn't have a great life growing up. They didn't have parents that were honorable, right? But I want to treat others the way I would want to be treated, and with a mutual respect, thinking this is a human being who deserves to be treated exactly as fairly as I would like to be treated. I think all the time of my grandmother watching me on a news channel. Would you be proud of what I did today in my official duties? Whether I'm sitting at the office, did I screw around for 4 hours of my 8-hour shift? Or did I literally give them a day's work for a day's pay? Grandma, would you see it and be honored that my last name was honored on the screen? Or would I have taken away from that last name that you put on my back, kind of a thing? I think of that numerous times. When I think of others, I always want to default to hoping they're doing the right thing, but realizing that people are inherently evil, and God's word says that they are. All you got to do is have two 2-year-olds together, my grandchildren being together in a room, show me consistently that people are not good. They are selfish and they are self-centered. And we have to teach them and guide them in the way that they should go so that they won't depart from that teaching when they're older, right? So whether or not people have any religion or not, a basic understanding of your human rights, of that you are a human being and a citizen or a resident of this country, and you should be treated with the respect of being alive and being mutually effective, right? It's when people violate any portion of those things that creates those chasms in between, creates those, I believe at some point I am superior over other people, becomes that calling card of, that's exactly where we all get off. I'm more important than you. And as soon as we've done that, we've lost honor and we've lost mutual respect, because now we are putting a hierarchy of whose needs need to be met first off of what I believe is more valuable based on whatever thing you want to base it on, instead of thinking of them as living, breathing human beings. I don't treat a 17-year-old kid who's doing a crime the same way I choose a 50-year-old, because this one's still learning and that one's had more than enough time, and that I'm going to handle these two differently, maybe committing the same crime, because I'm still got some teaching, mentoring, and guiding over here. And here I don't believe I have as much, and aren't just going to, hey, the legal system's going to be the legal system, right? Because that wisdom and discernment of, I think of friends and people who would be watching me thinking, hey, I would want you to treat that person with respect until they chose otherwise, right? Until they earned otherwise. And there are numerous times that I have been called a million names and been treated very poorly. And the expectation is that because of the badge you wear, that you do not respond in kind, that you keep your composure, that you keep your self together and you go forward with them. I think as we see each other doing that more often, that's exactly what we've got to do, is realize I'm not special, and there is no one who is special, more special than someone else. We are all here happening to be in the same country at the same time in the same years of our lives right now, and we should be trying to treat each other with that mutual respect. And if we started from the level of there was no agenda, and I'm not more important than you are, and you are not more important than me, and I am trying to learn, and you're trying to learn, and we are cooperating to work together, that is exactly what we're talking about when we talk about neighborhood policing, when we're having coffee with a cop. But it doesn't have to be about law enforcement. It needs to be about the human race. It needs to be about the people you meet at the Walmart that are in line, and you're 50th in line thinking, why are you people not all at work? Right? Because I'm there. I think the same thing. Like, I'm being inconvenienced with all you people being here at the same time as me today. Go. What did I just say? I just said, I am more important than you are. And you are not as important as I am. My time is more valuable than yours. Move. And then you're surprised when the rest of the world returns that in kind, John. If you don't turn around and give people that kind of respect, that's what they're going to get used to seeing. It's watching the YouTube video of the cops only doing bad things. Is that what you always encounter? Or do you find the people who find kindness and surprise you with a smile and a hello? And that's odd now. That's odd seeing somebody do something out of context and out of character like that. What makes them different? What makes them, even on a momentary 5 seconds of, they took a moment to smile at me and tell me to have a good day instead of, you're inconvenient and you do not matter and I didn't see you. Ultimately, I think that's what it comes back down to me when you really get down to the base of it.
Right. And I'm sure you could sit several law enforcement officers down and everybody's got a different opinion. But when it comes to what you just said, the human aspect of it, treating whether you're law enforcement or not, if someone is treating somebody decently like a human being, there's so many factors that come into that, right? Because the person first of all has to understand that they're not the most important, and maybe that other person is not the most important. But when you're both thinking that and you're both working towards a common goal of order or peace or respecting authority, there's just by default, just by accident, there's going to be a better atmosphere, a better community, a better sense of treating your fellow man. And
you can go wherever, live in peace with one another.
Right.
I mean, it is not a new concept.
Well, and that's right before Romans 13 that he says that. And so I'm going to segue to Romans 13, relate it to the executive branch of our government, and the governing authority is there, created by God to execute wrath on those who commit evil. And they're pretty clear. If they're not doing that, if the authority is not, so I relate this to just the human decency factor. You're treating your fellow man in peace as best you can. What does it look like when you can't? And what is the governing authority, which I would argue that the governing authority who's executing wrath on those who commit evil is law enforcement. The closest you could probably get to that is law enforcement. What does it look like when that's not happening? And I'd argue that this is what that, chaos is what that looks like. So, somewhere where there's no law or order is what that looks like.
And you weaken a generation of people that you are expecting to be guardians. I agreed with everything you just said. On top of that in Romans, it's talking about that you don't wield the sword for nothing. Well, all of a sudden, we're wielding a sword an awful lot for nothing. And so you are I'm trying to find nice words to say. You're trying to diminish the power and the authority of what that fear should be. You know, there were numerous times I didn't do things for fear of literally getting my butt spanked growing up, right? Consequences of my actions being severe enough that it kept me in line, even if I wanted to do some things out of fear of what it would cost me, I didn't. If you take that away, where is everyone going to default to? Because we've already said, we see it in 2 and 3 year olds. Everyone is selfish. Everyone is in their own self-interest at heart, and what I want, what I need, what I want for gratification, what I want for my success is going to be far outweighed by my wanting to appease you and give you a ground of common ground, and I'm going to take in a, might makes right kind of a thing. So when you start to water down your police forces and you start questioning whether or not how they go about doing their job and basing it on anything except your own subjectivity of what you believe should happen, when you are not willing to strap up, grab a gun belt, go through training, put your life on the line, and come out and do it with us, echoes very poorly in my mind of, if you haven't been willing to do it and put yourself out here and had to make those decisions in 3 seconds where you got to watch it for 30 minutes and Monday morning quarterback it, you have no right to that opinion. You have no right to judge in those seconds. And I always love the reporters who have to go to the shoot, don't shoot scenarios that we do with no cop training and put them on a video and watch how poorly they do in the videos. And then all of a sudden it's like a light bulb goes off. Like, I don't know how I ended up. I don't know why I pulled the trigger 15 times on this person that was just a granny with a book. And you just laugh and go, yeah, this is the kind of things you have to have lots of training for so that you are ready and you've kind of prepared for those scenarios. So we all had the training, but now they're making us question whether or not the way we do business, well, they deserved to have their hands on, but did you stop at the minimum amount of force you needed to use, or did you take one blow too much? We're going to have an inquiry on whether or not you used excessive force versus an adequate amount of force to stop the threat. And as a cop, I go, where's that line? Because it depends. Are you small like me? Are you 6'3"? Who are you arresting? Who are you dealing with? What kind of weapons did they have? What did I need to do to stop the threat? Was stopping the threat hitting them so hard and so fast and only striking once as hard as I could? Or was it 15 little tiny punches? Which one's the excessive force? Is it the excessive that I hit him 15 times, or is it excessive that I hit him once as hard as I could possibly do it and ended the fight? Whose subjectivity are we talking about when you say you're going to judge whether or not my use of force was reasonable and prudent? And then I think of this House Bill 2217 and think about who's judging, not sitting here in these shoes on whether or not they thought that was reasonable and prudent, not understanding or not being in the situation, in the scenario of, was it unreasonable, right? I think that's a much easier place to go. You know the difference between what's reasonable and unreasonable, where somebody's out of control and beating somebody who's down and still kicking. So I don't think it's as hard as people make it, but it certainly makes you, as an officer, stop and think, do I want to get involved in this? Is it really going to be worth my time? Is it going to be worth the scrutiny that I'm going to be put under because I got involved in this act someone else is choosing to do? Or is it easier to walk away and not watch what I'm doing? And I tell you that that's what's the most scary, is people who are unwilling to do what they know they need when they need to wield the sword. Right. You need to have guardians who are still here and are unapologetic about following the laws of the state and enforcing the laws of the state, because the laws are the collective agreements of people before us who put them in place. This isn't some great big mother government that we never had any influence over. These were people we elected at times to try and help put things in place. Has it gone through the roof? I know where he would have gone on that when you had the lawyer in here and having the conversation, so I don't need to reiterate the same things again. Is we need less laws with a whole lot more reasonable thought and discernment from the people who are enforcing them to minimize the amount of people who are willing to do them. But that means keeping everybody in line to that mutual respect that we talked about before.
Well, and I'm shifting gears to the citizens now, because that's what this is for. And not having any clue at all what law enforcement is supposed to do, just as much as not having any clue what judges are supposed to do, just as much as not having any clue what legislation is supposed to do, or your congressman, not having any of those clues and just saying, well, they handle it. I mean, I just live here. They take care of it. That's what I keep reiterating when I say it's the citizens' fault for not knowing anything at all. So knowing something about what law enforcement is supposed to do, and knowing what the authority is there for a reason. What's it for? It's to get rid of evil. It's to execute wrath on those who commit evil. So if they're not doing that, I could understand a citizen questioning, wondering, why are you doing this? But when they are not really understand, hey, this was too much. Well, how do you know it was too much? How do you know if it was too far? And then you have the combination of the media, or are you just watching this 10-second video when it was actually 35, 40 minutes? And I bring up the Kyle Rittenhouse case occasionally, because multiple videos being, you only saw a few seconds of certain things at first, and then all of a sudden all this other stuff got brought in, and then people watching it are going, oh yeah, then now that was, but in the first place, you're like, maybe that should have been your reaction in the first place, because you got everyone worked up because you were so mad over something you hadn't even seen yet. If the authority is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and what would you tell somebody who's not executing wrath on those who commit evil? Would you say that, hey, that's not authority if you're not doing that?
This becomes that empowerment conversation. And I'm going to give you a scenario that is prevalent in law enforcement that we don't have a good answer to really quick. A guy is on the highway at a gas station. You pull in behind him, and he's in a stolen car. He has literally just taken the car, not by force. They left the keys in it, got in the car, and he is literally leaving with these people's $20,000 sedan. Okay? You light him up and turn on your lights to pull him over, and he chooses that he's not going to stop.
When you say light him up,
that means turn on all the lights and sirens. They're right.
You're
not shooting them. Right. Thank you. We're going to turn on every light we have and the sirens, and we're going to go after this person, and they choose not to pull over. Now, in a society that is overwhelmed with, but you're going to risk and hurt our people for a property crime, don't chase this bad guy. We'll get him later. It's just a car, and it's okay. We're going to let that go. And you won't get sued as a law enforcement officer doing that. But you fight but I'm paid to protect and defend people from people who are committing crimes like this. And if I don't fight it and I don't stop it, they're just going to continue to go do this, because they now realize that we won't chase them if they're in a car and they just run or do anything dangerous from us. We're just going to let them go down the road. And I have seen both these scenarios where you had the guy who chases the vehicle and starts the chase and then pulls over and stops. And I've had the guy who has chased till the wheels fell off, crashed into some innocent as they were getting this $20,000 car back, and killed somebody innocently on no fault of their own that happened to be collateral damage to the pursuit that you were involved in. And I have seen the incidences of both the suspects and the police being charged for being involved in the exact same unreasonable and unprudent chase procedures, and that they weren't considering how dangerous all these things were. And you put everybody in a catch-22. So I always want to go to everybody and go, okay, we'll chase all the car bad guys that you want us to chase, but it might end up in people being killed at some point. Are you okay with that if it happens to be in your community, in your town, and it happens to be your baby girl that's in the car when we chased the $5,000 crack ride that was stolen? Where's your level of comfort of what you want versus where most of the police departments are now is, hey, unless it's a fleeing felon that's trying to murder or kill, rape, do something really bad right now, we're not chasing those anymore. The risk is not worth the reward of getting the person off. But what that does in a society is makes people empowered that car thefts are through the roof, and all you got to do is drive away.
You're saying that's the illusion that people have.
Correct.
Right. So you're letting them go because it could escalate certain things that don't have to be escalated. We'll get him later. Whereas people are sitting there saying, you let him go.
So what's the right answer, right? And that becomes that eternal question of, well, it depends is, of course, that answer, right? Of the rest of the circumstances, the best of our ability, that I would like to have other methods. And of course, we're always finding technology, and we're trying to do different things that, shoot a dart and follow it with GPS, or it's got a wheel lasso and you don't have to chase it. You literally let down a cage and shoot it out and grab a hold of it, and it literally sucks the car to a stop. There's some technological advances that are coming. Launch a drone out of your cop car and have it follow that vehicle until it stops, wherever it stops, and video wherever they go. And I mean, I can fix every problem in the police force if I have enough time, money, and manpower, if those are infinitely available. But that's the kind of scenario where you're asking about citizens is, how involved are you in, number one, supporting that you believe that they are doing the right things as your law enforcement officers to begin with? Because if I know I come from a position of being trusted to be doing the right things, it makes me feel empowered to go out and enforce what I know they have an expectation for me to enforce. So that support is huge. And vice versa, when the cops make a mistake and do something wrong, or literally commit a crime and do it knowingly, I'm transparent about it, show it to you, and we show how we take care of problem children like that, to show that mutual trust in respect back, that I would not cover up for somebody doing something that way. And that's how you build a department of people who have mutual respect with their citizens. And
well, how could that, and just for some action on the citizens' side, what can they do to know? Because I understand people work, people don't have the time to dedicate everything to everything. So sometimes what I'm asking is hopefully minimal, because what I do ask sometimes is just read the Constitution, and if you're a Christian, just read the Bible.
Right? Crazy ideas and knowing
right,
what it is, right?
and so how could a citizen, whether you're Christian or not, no matter if you're left or right, what could a citizen do to just have that, have what you're talking about, a little bit of trust in that what I'm doing is sincere, what I'm trying to do is sincere. So what can they do more in terms of being involved? I started out with just go to a city council meeting. Sure. Start there. Go to one.
Right.
Go to one. If you're a parent, go to one school board meeting. And what does this have to do with law enforcement? You might find that they have talks going on. You might find that you can have coffee with a cop. Do it once. Right. But is there anything else that a citizen could do to get involved, to have that communal aspect to it, to have that camaraderie?
I think that when we talked about that mutual respect piece of it, the one thing that when you're a hammer, and that's how I kind of put cops have to be the ones wielding the sword. It's very easy to make everything look like a nail. I need people who come from different walks of life, different perspectives, and different experiences inside and outside law enforcement to be involved in. The school district's a perfect example of that. Is if you go to a school board meeting and you figure out how many of the school resource officers are a part of the school, or how many extracurricular activities that law enforcement or the fire department or AMR is involved in any of your ambulance services, your personnel, and finding out all the ways that you could, with whatever skill set you have, maybe make a small influence in one place. If I can remember a young lady who was about 22, and I was probably in my late 40s, that was helping me coach. And we were talking about our families with the girls and that kind of stuff, with the high school soccer girls, and talking about your mom and your dad and making them proud and honoring them in the way we play and the things that we do. And kind of stopped, the conversation lulled. And one of the girls says, and they got up to go, and she looked at her friend and goes, I don't know my dad. I don't even know who he is or what he's ever done. He's never been around. And she got up and walked away. Not mad, it was a matter-of-fact conversation with another one of her friends. And the 22-year-old coach looked at me and said, yeah, you had a great life growing up, didn't you? Said, everybody doesn't have that experience, so that doesn't resonate with everybody the way it resonates with you. And it stuck with me for some reason, that I don't have some inclusive, I know everything about everybody's life. When I say the word parents, it's a great thing for me. All right. But that doesn't mean that it is for everyone else. And so a lot of those experiences come from people who are really strong at something or have overcome something. And I need them to understand, I look at everything like a nail, right? And sometimes that's to my own blind spot. And I need the citizens who are willing to go with honor, with respect, agree or disagree with respect, and give me their perspective. And I need to be the one willing to listen to outside opinion, no matter where it's coming from, because I don't know what they have gone through or what their story would be that would show me that if I could quickly run through everything in their minds and see what brought them to where they're having a conversation, I could find probably 8 or 10 different points in those stories where I would be fixing something, or we'd have to talk about our perceptions of these things are 100% different from each other because of what you experienced or went through, changed your mind to thinking this way, and mine went completely this way, and where's the middle ground on that? But it's having those open dialogues with people. And I'm not talking every board meeting. I'm not talking you're going to be at the police academy and being a citizen police academy citizen. It's about taking one meeting, one event, seeing how you could maybe help one time, and to see whether or not you don't have a skill set that maybe affects the rest of everybody else's lives. I think if everybody, like you said, I can't tell you how many people told me I didn't know that was a law. Like, well, ignorance to the law is not an excuse for not following it. You signed a driver's license card. You're responsible for all of the laws of the states that are readily available for you. Your ignorance to it doesn't mean they're any less in effect. And like you said, reading the word, I would tell you on both that you're absolutely right. You have to be willing, and then step into where where do you feel led that you might be able to make a difference of fixing that hole between these two extremes, whatever extremes they're at? Is it the right and the left? Is it cops and the public? What is it that you think you might have 5 minutes to be able to say, my experience might be able to help you in this situation or scenario, and be involved in a small way that changes the way somebody else perceives something that may or may not be right?
If the Bible is true, right, then good can overcome evil if there's too much good, right? And I think that it's claimed Christians' fault for not overcoming. If evil is overcoming, that means there's not enough good. And I don't think Christians do enough in terms of just reading scripture. I read a statistic, 7% of claimed Christians actually read it. And if you're not reading it, you don't know what's going on. Just as much as if you don't read the Constitution, you don't know what's going on. And I am in that boat. So I'm making the claim as well as putting myself on this pedestal and blaming myself as well as other claimed Christians. And I think that if you are a citizen and if you are a Christian, it is your responsibility to put yourself in positions that can make society better, that can make your community better, make your school better, make your home, just as much as you need to make your home better. And is that a wild claim? Is that too much? It would, and open to disagree as well as.
So I would think of all things working together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. So the big words in that are always his purpose, right? We're a fallen race. Sin is in us. We do wrong. I know I have consistently, even as a Christian. I'm like Paul. I don't do the things I know I should do, even though I know I shouldn't do them. Oh, woe is the guy that I am, because I know, but I'm still fighting myself. And I think I want to make a difference for the kingdom. What Jesus told us to do is to go out and to share the gospel, right? And ultimately, what does the gospel say is we all have to identify that we all are sinners, that we fall short of the glory of God. So the biggest piece of this is, whose are you, right? I belong to God, but I have fallen away, just like Adam, and even the first sin, and they were eternally separated. We have to admit that we don't have the answers in ourselves. We've been around 2,000 plus years of modern day since the Bible, right? So, and we haven't figured this out, right? We're not getting better at it. It's a repeat of good and bad at different levels, as far as I can see when I look through my history and see the things that have not changed from the same problems we have now as they had in biblical times, as we have in historical times before that. What I would say is we all have to understand that if you know you're fallen and you're looking for redemption, where do you go? And the only way to tell people that is in love, to realize I was as lost as I've ever been. And there is a creator out there who's got a better plan for us. In fact, his plan was so much better that he showed us by sending his own son to earth so that nobody would have to pay for those sins ever again. It would just be on him. And he died on a cross for those sins because there was no other way to make it right. And if I know that is the only hope and the only truth moving forward, because I've seen where the human race goes, my only job is to say, are you reading it yourself? Are you looking into it? Are you believing that you could make a difference in society? Most of the time, my works, the things that I do to honor God, I do to help people, but it's to honor what I've been forgiven of. I'm not earning my way into heaven. I got everything by Jesus dying on the cross and him taking my sin because I said, hey, Lord, I can't do it. But because of what he did, would you take me anyway? And he's faithful and true to forgive me of that. And I know it in my heart, and I know that's true. I know that's true because I can't earn it. And his word says it. And there's no other hope for me. But the one thing that my Savior asked me to do was tell others about it. And so I do that through my daily actions of working as hard as I can for a day's pay, a day's work for a day's pay. I do that by trying to honor my wife and my mom and my brothers and sisters and the people I work with. Some of the people I work with are extremely difficult. A lot of the people I meet on the road are extremely difficult, and I'd really rather not deal with them, and I wouldn't walk across the street to shake their hand a lot of the times. And then I have to remember what I talked about before of hey, I have assumed I am a better human being than them because I'm putting them in a place of less value than me. And my Savior didn't put me at a place of less value. He saved me anyway. So ultimately, I think every Christian, if they're really walking that walk, would demonstrate it through their love and their mutual respect. Even if you can't get to the level of that, I love everybody, I'm not there. I'd be the first one to say I don't love the way Christ loved, but I am building on my mutual respect and honoring others for who I think they have the potential to be. Forgiven, saved. Some will choose never to come around. That doesn't diminish that my job is to show them that love and that mutual respect through the rest of my life while I still have breath in me, so that maybe they see something that's authentic enough that they question enough to read for themselves to see whether or not what we Christians spout is actually has any merit and any integrity at all. And if you're around people, they're going to let you down, right? But somehow you'll know in your heart, you'll see it in people's actions that their fruit comes from good trees. You don't get bad fruit from good trees, and you don't get good fruit from bad trees, as God's word says. Watch people in their actions, not their one-time actions. Everybody makes mistakes, but consistency over 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Who's that person? Are they the same person most of the time moving forward? I would tell you as a personal citizen, that's the question internally that everybody ought to be asking themselves is, whose am I? What do I believe? And how can I help others to understand whether or not that's true or not?
And I think, and I don't want to be misunderstood either. I'm not saying you have to go be law enforcement to play your part as a Christian. And I'm not saying that you have to go be in Congress. I'm not saying you have to even, not saying what are you doing to take an active part in your citizenship as a Christian? Because some, and I've spoken with some that think that they are separate. You are not. It doesn't matter who the authority is in there. It doesn't matter if they're doing the wrong things. It doesn't matter. I just believe, and that's my job, and I'm done. And I disagree with that. I don't think you don't play an active part. And the country was founded on wildly Christian principles and not forced to be one religion or the other, but purposely to be free in your religion. And if you are a Christian and walking that walk.
Charles Swindoll, I think, is who I'm going to credit it to, said 2 girls are running to school. They hear the first bell ring, and they know they are already within the minutes before the tardy bell, and they are barely going to make it or may not make it. And then one girl looks at the other and says, let's stop and pray that God gets us to school on time. And the other one grabs her by the hand and says, let's pray while we're running as hard as we can. And I think all the time, are we running as hard as we can while we're honoring what God would have us doing? And I think that's really what it comes back to. Inaction is never called to just sit back and do nothing, right? Even go and share the gospel. Go. It means movement, means action, means moving forward. Everyone needed to do their part in the Old Testament. You needed to provide for yourself. You needed to be a contributing member to something, right? There is never a inaction except to reflect on what God's given you, or to reflect when you need time to think about it. But it's always with the idea of, but your ultimate goal is forward. I don't look at the things behind me, but I focus towards that crown. And someday I'll have that eternal rest. But until then, I am supposed to go as hard and as fast and endure numerous trials, because my Lord endured numerous trials. And that's way hard when you actually are in the middle of it and you're getting your tail kicked. And you're like, man, I didn't think I was signing up for this. Like, really? Well, read your Bible, because Jesus told you it was going to be a miserable time a lot of times. But take heed. He's overcome the world. So I have to have that end goal in mind of someday he's going to fix it. Someday King Jesus comes back and shows us where we've been broken, because we're not going to fix it here. How many people can we bring with us? How many people can we show authentically that what we say we believe is also what we show in actions of what we believe? Because the world is the fastest at finding people who are not authentic to what they say and do something completely different. And all I would, I guess, to finish with is say, what are you doing to be of use to God's kingdom? He puts the ball up on the tee. You don't have to do much with it, except you've got to be willing to swing. He's got you lined up at the plate, but if you're not the guy who gets up on and will swing, he'll leave you on the bench and let other people do it too. And I can't imagine a worse world than realizing at the end of time how many balls were put on a plate for me, how many balls were teed up that he wanted me to hit, and he had to bring in a switch hitter for me because I wasn't worthy, able, or willing to do the very simple things he asked me to do. And I think I will see those someday in the future, of realizing just how many crowns, how much glory I could have brought to his kingdom that someone else had to bring because he couldn't count on me. That bothers me enough to keep me motivated moving forward, to be a person who wants to help and make others think the way I'm thinking about it, of let's row together. There was a statement from one of my mentors last night who said, "Thank you for rowing on this boat and not drilling holes in the sides of it." And I thought, oh my goodness, that is exactly what I want. I want people who are willing to row with me and not drill holes in our boat, because we all go down together.
For the Vital Expedition, I'm Nathan Lewis, Studio Veritatis.